Session of the day. Last up, we have a panel discussion on caring for your audience. And now this is a very important conversation we have at every single GDCFP day. There's always a segment dedicated to this for a discussion, and folks always come away having learnt something. And there's always a stimulating debate because people learn things they didn't previously know. They never thought it was an issue. And, you know, their internal ingrained beliefs get challenged and they're like, oh, what's going on? So I've got three brilliant speakers here to discuss a few things relating to empathy and inclusion and how you can really make sure that you're including your audience and looking after them. So I'm just going to add them to the stream now. So hello everybody, thanks for joining me. I'm going to ask each one of you good folks to introduce yourselves. I think it would be much better coming from you. I'm going to come to you in alphabetical order by surname. Like, what a better way to do it. So Cy Rand, I'm going to come to you first.
Yep. Hey everyone, my name's Cy. I work as Microsoft C++ developer advocate, and I'm also involved in organizing #include C++, which is a diversity and inclusion organization for the C++ community. And you can find me at Tartan Llama on Twitter, where I spend most of my waking hours and probably some of my sleeping ones as well.
Really? Okay. Yes, maybe. Tartan Llama, in case anyone doesn't know, tartan is a fabric that Scotland is very famous for. And Cy also has the most photogenic and beautiful cat.
I have 3 cats. Yeah, they might show up at some point.
Please bring them in. We always want to see more. I know. I did see Ali's cats there while they were just waiting for the streams to start. So I'm going to come next to you, Ali King.
Right, my name's Ali, pronouns they, them. I'm a data engineer based in Edinburgh. I am actually currently just between jobs. I just finished the contract last week. So I specialise in big data engineering, which I've given some of my talks on. I'm also involved in diversity and tech. So I run the Queer Code Scotland meetup, which is a meetup for LGBTQ people with an interest in technology, which we've been running online for almost a year now. And we're always looking for speakers. So if someone would like a nice, friendly place to have a go at speaking, then you can do that there. I first got into speaking. I was on the Outreachy program, which some of you might be interested in. It's a paid internship in open source software, and that's how I got to do my first talk.
Brilliant, thanks, Ali. And Florence Okoye.
Hi, yes, my name is Florence. I am a user experience and service designer. I currently work at the Natural History Museum, but I've kind of worked in a couple of different sectors, rather. So my thing is kind of like critical perspectives on tech and design, really. And yeah, that's what I do.
Brilliant, thank you. Thanks everybody for giving up your time today to do the panel discussion with me. So let's not waste any time about this. Let's go straight in with something that I think not everybody understands, and some people take a lot of convincing. And what I'm talking about is, hi guys. I think everyone's got a view on this, and I know when I went to GDCFP Day and we talked about it, I was like, didn't know it was a thing really. But ever since then, I was educated at that point, and then ever since then, I have cringed whenever I've heard somebody say it, to be perfectly honest. So, Cy, I can hear you. I can see you nodding there. Tell me about why people shouldn't use hi guys.
Yeah, so I mean, for a long time and still nowadays, people considered it as a gender neutral greeting, but for so many people, it's either just feels like you're not being included, or it can trigger dysphoria if people feel like they're being misgendered. So it's just try and avoid. There are better alternatives like folks, everyone, friends, enemies, whatever. Maybe don't use enemies if you're in a conference talk, but like, you know, the audience that you're speaking to, or at least you should have an idea of who you're speaking to, and you should have an idea of the space that you're in and the kind of language which people will be most comfortable with. So yeah, always trying to use gender neutral terminology is good. we actually, in the hash include Discord, we have a command so that if someone says guys, then someone types exclamation mark guys, and it comes up with don't do that because this, here are some alternatives, just because it happens so often.
Yeah. And side note, you can do that on Slack as well. You can make a little Slack bot, a little hi guys Slack bot, and just do question mark guys, and it will tell you why not use these alternatives. So Ali, I think I heard you chuckling there. Tell us why it's problematic to address a group of people as guys.
Yeah, well, I mean, so some people, sort of understand it to be sort of gender neutral. I understand from friends from Ireland. I think in particular, in Irish English, then it is very often used and understood as sort of gender neutral. But because it can also be sort of used to mean sort of just men. I think I've kind of experienced that when I've been in very sort of largely male sort of work environments, say, so there's maybe like a couple of sort of women and non-binary people, but it is overwhelmingly guys that it is overwhelmingly, and so it can give you sort of the impression that actually they're just thinking about the men who are the majority, and anyone else is an afterthought. So I think that although people can take their own meanings from it, from any of these things, they can try, they can have their own intentions in the way that they say things. Then, if it is going to make people feel sort of alienated, that they're not being sort of included in that, then you should avoid it as much as possible.
Yeah, definitely. You can't just include everybody in that. Maybe once upon a time it was a universal term that people use, but we used to do a lot of things that clearly were quite harmful then and still are now. Florence, if somebody was looking for alternatives to hi guys, or they were kind of thinking, why can't I use it? What would you advise them to do instead?
I mean, there's a whole host of different. Sorry, my initial snarky answer would be you can pick up a thesaurus or kind of use an online thesaurus, because there's a whole host of things. For one thing, you don't even have to say anything. You can just say hello. And what's interesting is how many of us have like linguistic backgrounds that aren't English, where actually it's often more respectful to say the equivalent of good morning, hello. Like, you can do that. That's fine. I think it's also it's sometimes worth thinking about, like, with some of these tricks of or habits of language, which we all fall into. I mean, I guarantee over the course of this panel, I know I will probably say something will come out and I'll be like, oh, okay, no, I shouldn't have, I should use a different term. So it happens. I think sometimes it can also be helpful to think about it like from a wider perspective. Like, some of these habits of language come about because actually they're kind of they're mirroring a kind of assumption within society. So, the fact of the matter is that, if guys ever in a way, it's never actually been truly universal, in the same way as using men to mean humanity has never actually been truly universal. Even if it's meant as universal, it's kind of revealing the fact that really in society, the people who are considered truly human are men, and often cis men at that. So that's sometimes one way of thinking about things to almost help like deal with the, oh my goodness, I'm a terrible, terrible person. And it's like, well, you may well be, but more importantly, there are other ways you can also like mitigate that by kind of remembering that sometimes there are all these other influences and habits and things that we pick up, and actually a lot of the time it's up to us just to kind of do our best and to acknowledge that often it's more important not to harm other people than it is to try to necessarily be so like kind of self-absorbed, in a sense. Like, we're doing it to make things better for others, not so that we individually become like the best people ever. We're just here to do our best. Those are kind of my things. Just remember, the kind of it's sometimes not all about you, it's about others. Sometimes it's not even caused by you, it's often caused by others, and thesauruses are great.
Yeah, go and educate yourself, I think, is definitely a good one for a lot of this stuff about how to make sure we're more inclusive and we're not hurting anyone. Go and educate yourself. But I quite like folks. I've been saying you good people a lot because, let's just assume everybody's good, because they can prove it to me otherwise if they want to. Like you said, you might be a horrible person. Yeah, it's funny because some people will just come in and just say, hi, guys, but then they won't necessarily say the guys in the such and such team because they're like, well, they're not all guys. Well, hang on a minute. Why have you said hi, guys to them if they're not all guys? Like, where's that all coming from? So, yeah, and if it's a little thing that we can do to make people maybe not even feel included, maybe just make people not feel excluded, then why don't we just do that? It's quite simple, isn't it? And I have to admit, it is a phrase that I used a lot. And then I thought about it and I thought, actually, yeah, that is harmful. It doesn't make sense, even when you think about it, really. So let's try and use something else. And then you quickly, I found, got into the habit of changing what you say. But also, you do start to cringe when you hear other people say it. I personally have found, especially when I've gone to meetups where they say they're welcoming to folks who are marginalised and underrepresented groups, and yet they're addressing the whole group as hi guys, and you're just like, well, okay, you need to go pick up that thesaurus, don't you, friend? Okay. So just thinking about language, because there are a lot of pitfalls, like you say, Florence, and we can fall into these things by accident, can't we? We can accidentally say things. And as long as we learn from it and, are remorseful about it and we know that we've done something wrong, then we could be forgiven, we can forgive ourselves. What other kinds of things, language-wise, Florence, would you say people might need to think about that might be problematic?
So I think anything that ends up, it's kind of assuming something about people. So anything that, say, assumes someone is straight or cis or white or a man, there's and there's, because like very little things. It's like, things like people using the word partner instead of saying, like, specifying gender, for example, can be really helpful, because obviously that helps kind of like, it's a neutral term, and it can both protect those, say, who are not out, and I think, and also can, I don't know, also, like, especially if you're from a culture that kind of sees marriage as somehow like the ultimate goal, kind of, officially, like religiously or like civilly recognized marriage is like the ultimate goal. It also kind of brings it can bring a dignity. Not obviously, not everyone will think that, but it can kind of be like, yeah, no, actually, this person I'm with is as important as, say, someone who, someone for someone else, they've done like the whole shebang. Things that kind of, one of the things that I found really interesting is especially hearing from like disabled people when they're talking about how often like abled people will talk about like disability, like aids or tools or whatever, and often like you might hear phrases like, they've overcome sort of like, the wheelchair, or they've kind of managed to push through. And it's like, actually, if you use that stuff, it's like, it's just a part of me. It's part of my body. Like, in the same way, like I wouldn't say to someone, oh, wow, here you are at 9 o'clock in the morning. You have overcome your like innate human like instinct to get up actually only when the sun has actually come up, and not kind of due to the impulse of capitalism. So I think, so there's all these kind of, so there's kind of all these are just all examples of things like that. You kind of end up like centering a particular type of person and kind of assuming something about someone's experience that just actually isn't true. And often the way to think about it, or to help stop yourself from doing that, I have found, as someone who does I can talk a lot, as you will see over the course of this panel, is just maybe slowing down and really thinking, like, what actually is it that I'm saying?
Actually, instead of getting caught up in the whole how am I saying it and who am I saying it to, and like, just step back and what actually are you trying to get across here, and just stick to that, because it will probably get you out of a lot of trouble otherwise. So definitely. And you touched on something really interesting there, which I'm going to ask Ali for their thoughts on. Ableist language. Ali, tell us a little bit about that, because I think some folks might not have thought of it or might not have heard about this.
I mean, well, I guess one example would be the way that, say, people use terms related to mental illness to as, say, insults, or let's say, like, saying that that something is crazy or something like that. And there's various other, sort of other things that are very kind of very sort of baked into the language often, that people don't think about these things as being ableist terms, because they're just, I don't know, they maybe grew up with them as, sort of, say, playground insults. Yeah, I don't know what else I could sort of say on that, but yeah, sort of that equally sort of applies to sort of physical disabilities as well.
Yeah, like, it used to be a thing. People probably still say it out of ignorance, don't they? They say something's lame, for example, or they're doing a blind something. People use these terms all the time, but they don't actually think about the folks that have conditions, or that, that are different. They're just different, aren't they? And we don't think about that when we use this terminology, that actually this is somebody's life that we're talking about. So, Sai, tell me, because we're obviously talking about some stuff here that folks not necessarily being exposed to before might never have thought of, and now they might be thinking, oh, you know what, I'm scared to say anything now because I might get it wrong and I might offend somebody. What advice would you give somebody who does want to try and then accidentally says something ableist, or does say the hi guys thing, or does slip up and feels really bad about it? How can they sort of try to remedy the situation?
Yeah, so I'd say the first thing, the best thing that you can do is like practice and educate yourself, so that you try and mitigate the possibility of you making these mistakes in the first place. Like, of course, we want to be like kind to folks, and people should be allowed to make mistakes and then make up for them. But like, you should try not to make the mistake in the first place. You need to try and do the work as much as you can. If you do the work and then you still make mistakes, then like you need to extend the kindness to yourself as well, to be like, okay, well, I'm not just like intrinsically a terrible person. I made an honest mistake and I want to correct it. And then you have to try and correct it. That could be, if you just slip up while you're talking on stage, it could just be to catch yourself, like stop what you're saying and just say the right term. It could be as simple as that. You don't need to like make a big thing of it. If you just say like, hey guys, everyone, and just move on. If it's something simple like that, you can just make a small correction. If it's something a little like that might have a more of a negative impact on people, then you might need to like step back and formally say like, oh, I'm really sorry I said this thing, it's damaging because of X. Here's what I'll do in the future. I think the important thing there is it's always about impact and not intent. Like, even if you don't understand that what you've said is bad or impacting people negatively, it can still have that impact. And the fact that you didn't intend it doesn't really help the person who was negatively impacted. So you always need to be, if you've said something and someone says, this damages people who are in this, have this marginalized identity or whatever, then you have to like sit with that and not say, well, I didn't mean it like that. So it's, yeah, you have to be like, oh, sorry, I didn't realize that this would have this impact. Here's how I'm going to try and rectify the situation.
Yeah, I think it's important not to take it as a personal attack on you. Like, some people get very defensive and they go, well, that's not what I meant at all. I'm like the least like ableist person that you could ever meet, or whatever. So to be able to say, oh right, I didn't realize that that word had that meaning, or whatever, and then just take it back and learn and practice. Something that's a useful tool is if you're in Slack, then you talked about sort of auto bots for hey guys, and one of the Slacks I'm in has something similar for people using ableist language, and just basically says that's not acceptable. You might want to use these terms instead.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, totally agree with everything there. Florence, you were chuckling away there. Is there anything you wanted to add to that?
I mean, it's more just kind of an agreement, especially with what Sai was saying about education. And I think that defensiveness that Ali was talking about, and it's kind of what I was mentioning as well beforehand. It can really help when you've educated yourself and you understand that a lot of these things are structural. Like it's not. There is so little value in getting all defensive and het up and wound up, because actually it's bigger than you. In a sense, it's not all about you. It's actually about kind of the people who society as a whole has othered and tended to marginalize. Yeah,
Definitely. Yeah, there's definitely sections of society that are seen as the default, and everyone else is the others, aren't they? Who are special in some way or whatever. And what Sai said is absolutely right. You might not have meant it, but the impact on somebody is something that's their lived experience now, isn't it? And you can't deny that. So yeah. So that was quite serious. I want to change up the pace a little bit, and I want to ask you some quick questions just generally about public speaking and conferences, really, just to get your perspectives. So I'm going to start with Ali. I'm just going to ask you 4 questions. I'd like you to just say the first thing that comes into your head. So your favorite conference that you've spoken at?
I really enjoyed Co-Promotion Amsterdam. So that's a series of conferences run by the organisers are based in Italy, and they run ones across Europe, different cities. And that was, I think that the organisers were really sort of nice, looked after the speakers, and this one was a conference with a wide variety of topics. So I kind of enjoyed going into things that were specialism sort of outside of my own, and like sort of learning stuff like about different languages and like sort of different sort of areas like sort of front end UX and things like that. So yeah, that was good. Although Closure X in London was also a very, very nice one socially.
Cool. Okay, and your favorite talk that you've given?
That would be one. So data pipeline evolution. It started out had an idea about doing something about Pokemon, because this was the summer when everyone was like playing Pokemon Go, and I thought I had like this idea about having like Pokemon evolving into each other. However, by the time I'd gotten around to writing the talk, then that was maybe a little bit passé. So it basically turned into introducing people to data engineering, which I found that even like within the company where I was working then, it was a bit of a mystery to people what we did in our team. So talking about sort of big data engineering and going, bringing that from sort of one big import of data to something that's a lot more kind of sort of batch based and streaming. And I ended up doing that one for it 3 times for 3 different audiences. The first time I did it was at PyCon Ireland in Dublin. So that was for, as you might guess, mostly an audience of Python developers, although mostly not from a data engineering background, although there might be someone with some data science. Then I did it at Data-Driven Innovation, a conference in Rome, which was more data science focused. And then at that last one I mentioned, Co-Promotion Amsterdam, which was a more kind of general one, and I tailored the sort of focus and the language of the talk for each one, sort of bearing in mind what the sort of I guess expected knowledge level of the people in each of those cases on what they might be interested in.
Cool. Yeah. And the lesson that we've learned today is if you've got a talk, do try and propose it to a few places that it's relevant to. So definitely pays off, doesn't it? A conference that you would love to speak at?
The one that really strikes me is Strange Loop, a conference based in the US. There's a lot of stuff around. It's very kind of like cross-functional, but it has sort of kind of a very much sort of a functional programming basis to it, and it's organized by some of the same people who organize who are involved in sort of closure programming world, which is one that I've been in. I'm not sure what I would present on, but I will give it some thought. I think the next one is in St. Louis, Missouri, in the autumn. But well, let's see if that happens as planned.
Autumn, which year? That's what I would love to know. And a talk that you've really loved.
I enjoyed one of the closure conferences I went to. I enjoyed Adam Thornhill's talk, which was repository mining with closure. And so this is talking about doing basically data forensics on your Git logs. So looking at patterns of sort of where people are writing code and where code is being sort of rewritten a lot and things like that. So it produced some really sort of powerful visualizations, and so I thought that is so cool. I'm going to go home and do that. The author provided some sort of data libraries and also had a book, and I thought that was great. And I actually took that then to a company hackathon. So basically did that, ran this stuff on the company's code bases, and ended up doing talks. The first time I was actually doing internal talks within the company, on the basis of that. So I think it was very, very sort of influential on me.
Thanks, Sally, for sharing. And what I will say as well is that we've had some really great talks and speakers and stuff recommended just through me asking those 4 questions of speakers today. And some really kind folks in the chat have transcribed and gone and find the links to all these talks and stuff. So if you go and have a look on there, you should be able to find most of the links to the things that people have recommended. So thanks for sharing, Ali. I will do this exercise again with Si and Florence later on in the panel. But until then, let's discuss. Somebody has asked if the panelists could share how they've learned and changed their perspectives on this, what we've just been talking about over time. And Si, you quite sort of unequivocally said that people have to do the work, and that really kind of stuck with me, and I totally agree with you. Can you share with us how you've learned and changed your perspectives on this over time with us?
Sure. I mean, it's all been from hearing perspectives from people directly who are affected by this. Like, you can read all of the articles that you want. You can, see all of the like evidence-based stuff or whatever. But for me, nothing has had as much of an impact as like following people on Twitter from a huge range of backgrounds and identities and getting a sense of their perspectives. That's been the main driving force between, like, to be honest, like most of my development in any kind of area.
Yeah. Has there been anything, and it's okay if there isn't, but has there been anything that's really surprised you that you've learned?
I think that there will have been towards the start of my journey in, moving away from fairly like average white middle class upbringing, that the more and more you're exposed to these things and how terrible capitalism and cis heteropatriarchy makes things for people who don't fit into the norm, the less surprised you get, I think.
Yeah. The more you see, the more you actually see, I guess, is what you're saying there, isn't it? And Florence, the same questions to you. So could you share with us how you've learned and changed your perspectives on this over time, and were there any surprises?
I mean, honestly, it's pretty much exactly the same as Si. I think it definitely helps, like, from the outset, like, especially being Black in a predominantly white nation, and raised in a predominantly white area, which kind of lower middle class area. So that definitely helps to kind of start off with. But yeah, I think it's just, and having a kind of curiosity, because I'll be the first one to admit, like, I find people quite intimidating and interesting, and there's kind of 2 ways of dealing with that. Either you kind of like avoid people, which I definitely also sometimes do, but then the other thing is that you end up having like this just curiosity, and even me, like, sometimes on Twitter I will just follow anyone who I'm just like, oh, that's interesting, that's really interesting, I just want to hear. I don't even want to understand, I just want to hear another voice and have another person that I haven't come across because of the fact that, like, yeah, I find people really interesting. And I think maybe, yeah, you know, I think maybe that is also I mean, it's helped me, but then I've got a very particular personality and all my quirks, but having that kind of curiosity about people, and not in an inquiring, like, detective way, but a curiosity in a sense of, like, you know, you're aware of what, in some ways it almost comes from an awareness of yourself, actually. Like, when you're really honest with yourself and you're like, do you know what, I come from this background, this is kind of the way how about if I just find voices of someone who's like the opposite to me, or who I would perceive as the opposite. Sometimes even just starting in that really, like, didactic way is the best thing to do. As long as you're also, like, you know, you've got manners, so you're not just like doing it to annoy the other. You're doing it just to kind of be like, okay, so this is this perspective that actually I just haven't really, like, considered or, like, come across or whatever.
Yeah, there's definitely a line, isn't there? Because, you know, like we've all kind of agreed, is that we don't want those folks to have to do the labour of educating people. Si, you're waving at me. Are you agreeing?
No, I'm waving at Kitty.
Oh, I was like, I could see a hand. We don't want folks to have to take on the additional burden of the labour of educating others as well. So if we can be curious and do it in a gentle way and from a place of caring and genuine curiosity and learning, then yeah, it should be helpful for us for our own development. Ali, what's your take on it? So you're in terms of your own kind of learning journey in this and how you've changed your perspectives, and also were there any surprises to you?
Yeah, I mean, I agree on the following people on social media thing that I definitely learned a lot through that, and like following and and also people in different countries and seeing sort of how the different sort of like diversity things are running in those places, and what the sort of differences are to where I live. I think it is important, like you say about the sort of, I guess, the emotional labor thing, that you're not kind of following these people and then going, oh, can you give me like 101 on your particular sort of area, that is good to, like, say if people are posting articles and to read those, but yeah, not to demand that people answer very basic questions when you haven't done the very basic work of of actually sort of researching that yourself. And I guess what I have sort of noticed more in recent years is the kind of the more prominence of sort of neurodiversity, and just being aware of that some people can sort of think and experience the world in very different ways. If they say autism spectrum or else something along those lines, and so to understand how that they might say, understand your messages differently, or they might choose to watch your talk in a different way.
Yeah, definitely. Should give your message in the way that somebody receives it, I guess, for want of a better one. I didn't put that very well. Not in the way you want to give it to them, because again, that's like what we said earlier about intent and impact. So to reduce or eliminate the harmful impact, think about the way that you're communicating with them, and is that the best way to do that? So let's do another set of quick fire questions. Florence, I'm going to come to you. So your favorite conference that you've spoken at?
Probably, I'm just going to say JSConf EU. It was held in Berlin, like, annually, and it was like one of the first ones I ever went to as on like a diversity like ticket, as it were. So it was completely free, and then later got to be able to speak there. So it has a kind of like emotional significance for me, I guess.
Nice. Yeah, I did get a few scholarship tickets it wouldn't have been last year, the year before. It's almost like last year didn't happen in a way. Strange. And it's enabled me to see quite a lot of good conferences too. So I would recommend that to folks who are eligible. If you can get scholarship tickets for conferences, it definitely opens your eyes up to different things, and maybe one day you'll be on the stage. Favorite talk you've given?
Yeah, not so much about talk. I personally, I like workshops. I like working through and making things with people. I think I think it started off at the Service Design Fringe Festival. I think 2017, maybe 2018. So there's a series of workshops I've been doing about like holistic design. And yeah, so and kind of creating frameworks for making sure you are designing holistically / ethically / mindfully, whatever. And that's been really, I think I chose that just because that's, in a way, it's been the most kind of the most impactful, like actually really being able to have being in a space with other makers and designers for UX, graphic, code-based databases, any type of, all designers. And there's just been something that's really powerful about having this space where it's just us. You don't have to worry about your manager or anyone else is listening in. And we're just having very real and honest conversations about our day-to-day work and trying together to come up with ways of making sure that we can be the kind of the technologists that a lot of us do want to be. So I would say that's probably like my favorite workshop that I've done and still doing. Not as much, but obviously with the plague. But
yeah. Hopefully again very soon. And a conference that you would love to speak at.
Theorizing the web, just because they all seem to have really interesting Twitter conversations. And I did apply once, and I think and I wasn't able to travel because I was in the States and I wasn't able to get money and all that together. But yeah, that seems like a really awesome conference.
So did you get accepted then? It's just that you weren't able to make it?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did. And then I was just like, actually, no, I cannot afford this. I'm really sorry. I think I didn't get accepted. I think I even bothered submitting. And then I was like, I have no money.
Yeah, that's a shame, isn't it? I think there's something that we don't have that problem at the moment because most of them are online. It's not the same, but you still get to speak at that conference. So yeah, it's a little bit kind of, I don't know, it's pros and cons, isn't it? And a talk you really loved.
There's been lots of really good ones. I really loved Liz Jackson's Productivity Recreates Disability for New Adventures conference. And Ada Wunmi, she did this really great one, Who Owns Your Data, for TEDx Brum 2018. And then there's other folks like Charlie Owen, obviously Tatiana Mack, and Joe McLeod, who do really interesting, very historically aware, very intersectional, interesting types of talks. So
we were talking earlier about, should you pose a question at the beginning of your abstract or in your talk title, and who owns your data? Well, we know the answer to that one, don't we? Pretty clear. Thanks for sharing. Sai, I'm going to come to you and ask you those same 4 questions because I'm really conscious that we're getting close to 3 and I really want to hear what you recommend. So your favorite conference that you've spoken at, please.
It's probably ACCU Conf. It's most of the conferences I speak at are C++ conferences, whereas this is for any language. It's mostly focused on C++, but there's stuff from everywhere, from Rust and Kotlin and Python and whatnot. So it's always interesting to have that bunch of different people from different programming communities all in one place learning from each other.
Cool. Yeah, that sounds really good. Favorite talk that you've given?
Probably a collaborative talk I gave with a friend of mine called Hello World from Scratch, where we spent 90 minutes talking about Hello World in C, going from you have some text, which is your code, and what are all of the different stages that your compiler and your runtime and your standard library go through in order to get Hello World printed out on a console. So we went through all the stages of compilation, how linkers work, everything. It was really, really fun talk.
Wow. Have you got a link to that?
Yeah, I think that one I gave at ACCU Conf and then gave again somewhere else, but I can't remember. I've given it a couple of times. So, yeah, I'll find the link. I'll paste it in the chat.
Yeah, all three of you, please do post up your favourite talk you've given so folks can enjoy those too. And Si, your conference that you'd love to speak at.
I'd like to speak at Concatenate, if they run it again. It's one which ran the first time in 2019 in Nigeria, and it's just a really amazing selection of topics and really incredible diverse set of speakers. Yeah, it would be a really interesting place to give a talk.
And concatenate is a really great word, isn't it? It rolls off the tongue. And a talk you really loved.
I really loved Melinda Seckenton gave a trilogy of talks that which are like 20 minutes on the art of like storytelling and slide design and story design. They should give them at the DevRelCon. They're really, really good. I think some of them have been like involved in the Global Diversity CFP Day streams before, but they're all fantastic. Would highly recommend.
Yeah, so Si's right. Remember, everybody, that I said that Global Diversity CFP Day is normally an in-person event, and obviously for COVID reasons, it isn't this year. So we do have like a playbook that organisers can use locally if they want to. And Melinda's talk about the art of slide design is one of those materials, and you can find that on the Global Diversity CFP Day website if you want to check that out. I do recommend it. It does take a lot of practice to get your slides as good as Melinda's, but it's a really good starting point, and she highlights some books that she's taken some kind of seeds of ideas from and developed her ideas from. So we've only got a few minutes left, and what I want to ask you now is about codes of conduct. And I think for some people here, it might be the first time they've ever seen one coming to this conference. It might be that normally they don't have to sign up to one. So Ali, can you tell me why it's important for conferences to have codes of conduct, and what advice would you give to somebody if they think they want to speak somewhere and there isn't a code of conduct?
Right, so well, code of conduct, it basically kind of lays out what is unacceptable behavior, and so rather than leaving that to the strictly down to the judgment of the people running the conference, so that you know what sort of type of behavior is unacceptable for you to do, and is unacceptable if other people sort of do that to you. I would say that the code of conduct is only as good as its enforcement, and so the people running an event need to have a plan of what to do if someone goes against any of the so basically there's an instance where someone goes against one of the rules of the code of conduct. They need to have a rule of how how can people contact them, who do they contact if there's an issue, and you will have noticed in today's event that it's been made very clear exactly how to report any issues. And it also needs to be defined what are the potential consequences for someone going against that. So the thing is that I noticed like the last few years, then basically a load of code of conduct became a thing, and just most events were like just slapping on the boilerplate one. So but I guess you'd need to know more about the organization running the event as to what their intentions were about actually enforcing that. So I think there's a thing where it became that we have to have a code of conduct, but they don't necessarily have very thought through plans for enforcing that, and that can almost be worse because it might lead people into sort of a false sense of security. So I think it's worthwhile as well looking for, as well as the code of conduct, sort of details of how it's going to be carried out and enforced. If an event doesn't have a code of conduct, then you sort of ask about it. And I think a lot of events would be happy to do it. I mean, I did have to ask at an event some years back, just because basically I thought that there might be someone present there who might be sort of cause issues, and and they didn't have, they didn't initially have a code of conduct, but they very quickly got that enforced, and they laid out what exactly how they would sort of enforce that if they needed to. But if the organisation pushes back against having a code of conduct, or just proposes a very kind of loose, let's be excellent to each other type thing, then I think that's maybe a sign that you don't want to be at that event, because if something happens, and at tech events, you can read I think on Geek Feminism Wiki there's a whole like list of events and things that have happened at mostly very male dominated tech events. Then basically if they're not putting forth a kind of a sort of well-intentioned sort of effort to bring it in, then you maybe don't want to go there. Go and speak at another event instead.
Yeah, definitely. And what you just said about the be excellent to each other, I've seen that so many times. It's like there's one rule, just be nice, and it's like, well, you clearly have never been on the receiving end of some quite harmful behavior. You clearly don't attract that because you fall into these categories and you have privilege, and more privilege than I have, and it really kind of shows people up a bit. And also when they said, like you say, they take a boilerplate, there are boilerplates available that are very good and they are fit for purpose, but they don't bother to even change the name of the conference in them. And it's just like, also it says insert name and they haven't bothered to put their name in. And like you say, the code of conduct is only as good as the enforcement of it. So if you don't enforce it, then it's not worth the paper it's written on. So Florence, what advice would you give people about codes of conduct, and whether or not to speak at a conference that maybe hasn't got one?
I mean, I definitely inquire and make sure that that they either create one, certainly, I mean, and also maybe even ask why they don't have one. But then that's probably me being the curious person. I mean, actually, no, I have to be honest. I probably wouldn't even be curious. I probably just wouldn't speak at the conference, to be really honest. The power of saying no. And sometimes it's lovely when people give you a great excuse to say no, especially if you're a people pleaser. So, I mean, always take that advantage, I would say. But yeah, no, definitely ask why. And maybe even if you're comfortable and maybe you kind of know people, maybe talk to some of the other speakers, because this is something, this has not been an exact issue for me, but some of the things like about honorariums and things like that, like actually it's I got like a particularly quite, in some cases, quite a nice amount of money for doing a talk. And actually it was because one of the other speakers maybe was even more famous and kind of more impactful, had made sure and asked and been intentional about that. So I think there's definitely something about like, get in touch with their fellow speakers. Do they know what's going down? Maybe do some research, and just kind of almost, generate solidarity that way. But yeah, definitely ask, and also don't feel like you have to do the work. As has been mentioned, there are boilerplates. They don't feel like, oh, maybe they just don't know about them. They can find out about them. It is fine.
They totally can. They've gone to the trouble of running this big event with budgets and whatever else. And like I said, if they've got one, it doesn't mean they're going to do anything with it. So they kind of need to learn. Si, have you got any final thoughts on codes of conduct and what you'd say to somebody if they saw something that didn't have one? Or have you ever decided not to speak at one because they didn't have one?
Yeah, I definitely have. And I've heard the best excuses, and the best excuses are always just still a giant red flag. Like, if they're arguing against it, they might sound reasonable, but just, it's not worth it. Just don't.
No, because you will only find out how bad it can be if somebody violates it and it doesn't get dealt with, and you don't want to take that risk. Totally agree with you. Folks, that is the end of our session. That went really fast. I don't know how you feel. I feel like that 50 minutes went really fast. But thanks so much for joining me for this panel discussion. I feel like I've definitely learned something from you, and I think that the attendees will have as well. And thanks so much for sharing your personal experiences and your insights, and also telling us about your learning journeys and advising others on how they can become better at caring for their audiences.
All right, thanks.
No worries. Take care of yourselves. Until I see you next time.